So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to use number properties. My name is Rajat Sudhana. I am one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Ashutosh Mishra, Payal Tandon, and Sandeep. Um, Payal is the other co-founder of e-GMAT, and she's going to be a main host today. Ashutosh and Sandeep are GMAT strategy experts, and they're going to be your co-host today. In this webinar, we're going to focus on prime numbers and LCM and GCD. What we're going to demonstrate is if you know and understand just the very basics, we can help you use them to solve the easiest to the most challenging questions. We can help you isolate the mistakes that students most often make while solving those difficult questions. It's a fairly application focused webinar, and to make sure that you have that right foundation to follow this webinar along, we did send a few video lessons your way. The video lessons were on prime numbers, so prime numbers 1 and 2. If you've not gone through these video lessons, please go through them post this webinar. They are a part of your free trial. Let me just hide this. We also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free webinar next Saturday on GMAT reading comprehension. For those of you who want to score 90th in the 90th percentile in GMAT RC, we show you the key reading strategies that you need to master to solve GMAT RC. That's very popular webinar, very, very heavily attended. And then next weekend, we also have a free Quant workshop. In this workshop, think of it as a proctored mock test. We give you two mini mock tests, and then based on these mock tests, we do two things. One is to give you an estimate of your Quant score, and B, we tell you what are the key areas that you need to work on, and then based on that, we create a personalized study plan for you to go from, let's say, a Q44 to a Q49, a Q47 to a Q50, and so on and so forth. So you can register for the same over here. Now, since it's a free webinar, it's fairly heavily attended, and to make sure that we do justice to this group as a whole, we did send we do ask a few leading questions. One of them is, when do you plan to take the test? The next one is, what is your target GMAT score? Let me put that poll in. Okay, based on the data that I have over here with regards to when do you plan to take the test, what I can really see is, again, fairly even group, very similar to what it was yesterday for the sentence correction webinar, where the smallest group over here is about 17%, the biggest one is about 22%. So we have people who probably are at every stage of learning when it comes to studying for the GMAT. That's very good. And then with regards to the target GMAT score, what I can really see is that about 45-46% of you aim to score for 730 or higher. The biggest group is in the 710, 720, and then we have about 18%, give or take, in the 600 to 700 bracket. That's wonderful. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. The screen will change for you in the next 10 to 12 seconds or so. Okay, let's get in a yes/no poll over here. Once the screen has changed, you should see number properties 2, Quant Live Session. Select yes if you can see that. All right, it seems pretty much everyone can see the same. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So what you see over here is a presentation pod, which is the one front and center. And below that, you see what we call as a question and answer pod. During this webinar, if you have a question, you can post that question in the Q&A pod. One thing, however, I would mention is that if you have a question that's a bit more personal to you, for which you think would need a bit more information from you, reserve those questions towards the end. It allows us to get those insights in from you and give you a good answer. Also, if we need to schedule a call with you, we'd be happy to do that. We'll let you know how the mechanism for the same. There are essentially three parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to e-GMAT. then Payal would take over and get into the core of this webinar. It's going to be about 105 minutes. And then, as I said, if you have questions that are a bit more personal to you, if you have questions which hint towards other aspects of GMAT Quant, GMAT Verbal, or your MBA application, we do reserve some time towards the end for an open-ended Q&A so that you can ask those questions and get really good answers. With that, let's go into the first part of the webinar, which is an introduction to e-GMAT. That's going to be about 15 minutes or so from this point on. So early on, I asked this question, what's your target GMAT score? And about 45% of you, give or take, said, yeah, your target GMAT score is 720 or higher. While that may be the case, statistically, only 6% of the people get to those scores. And this is despite the fact that median scores at top B schools continue to go up. In fact, over the last 5 years, which is in the time span 2014 to 2019, median scores for 23 out of top 20 or top 25 B schools have gone up significantly. Now, what is it that that people who get to these scores do? A good percentage of them use e-GMAT. Why do I say that? When you look at the key stats on major forums, one is the number of verified reviews. The second is the number of success stories. What you're going to find is that e-GMAT accounts for more verified reviews than do all the other major test prep companies combined, and more students mention e-GMAT as the cause of their success than do mention all the other major prep companies combined. So what is it that makes our students more successful? I think there's one reason that makes our students more successful. It is our approach to GMAT preparation or the architecture of learning that we provide. So what does our approach to GMAT preparation mean? Or what is the architecture of learning? So to do that, let me talk about the two prevalent architectures of learning today. When you think about various architectures of learning, you're going to find that two major architectures exist today. One is what we call as a book-based architecture, and the second is a private tutoring-based architecture. Now, when you map the various online courses out there to one of these two architectures, what you're going to find is that most of them are built around this book-based architecture. Even though they provide audiovisual instruction, even though they provide exercises, their core learning architecture is this book-based architecture. e-GMAT, on the other hand, is focused a lot more on this private tutoring-based architecture. So let's see, why do we say one architecture is better than the other in helping you get to that 720 score, or actually even higher? So to do that, here's an efficient path to getting to that 720 or higher score. One is you first understand the areas of focus that you need to have, which is, hey, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How much time do you need to spend to improve on your areas of weakness? That's the first thing that you need to define. Then you need to learn the concepts that you need to learn. Merely knowing the concepts isn't enough. As Payal is going to demonstrate in a few minutes, you should know how to apply those concepts. You should know how to avoid pitfalls related to those concepts as well. And you need to get so good at applying those concepts that you attain a level of mastery that puts you in that top 4, top 5, or even top 1 percentile of students out there. So let's see how a book-based architecture addresses this problem. A book-based architecture is all about autonomy, which means that you study using a book, you get a couple of study plans, you actually use those study plans. And if you have to customize, you may customize those study plans to a certain degree, but essentially that's something that's completely on you. Then you learn concepts. Now, books are a great way of learning concepts. The problem really is books rarely provide validation when it comes to learning concepts, which means that, for example, in number properties, there are about 50 concepts that you need to learn. When you read a number properties chapter in a particular book, a book won't give you feedback as to the level of proficiency that you've gone to for each of those concepts. So that burden of validation is completely on you as a student. One area where books don't do as great a job is teaching you how to apply concepts. Why? Because books essentially teach you concepts and they give you practice questions. So people who learn from books resort to solving tens of questions when it comes to to apply, learning how to apply those concepts. And yes, some are able to master application, but they're only the best and the brightest. And when it comes to evaluation of mastery, to figure out whether you are in that top, 5 percentile of students or top 1 percentile of students, people who follow this book-based architecture resort to taking mock tests. And when you take a mock test, you do get a lot of data, but that onus of evaluation again is completely on you. How does that data relate to a section such as number properties or algebra or geometry is completely on you. A private tutoring architecture works very differently. When you work with a good private tutor, the first thing that a good private tutor would do is spend a couple of hours with you analyzing your strengths, assessing your weaknesses, and based on that, a good private tutor would devise a study plan that can tell you this is the amount of time you have to spend on each and every aspect of GMAT preparation. He would then outline the milestones that you need to achieve to make sure that you're going in the right direction. Then a good private tutor would teach you concepts, giving you feedback on the areas that you really need to work on. Once you learn a few concepts, a good private tutor would also teach you how to apply those concepts. And while teaching you how to apply those concepts, a good private tutor will tell you what you need to do on each step. And when it comes to evaluation of mastery, as you're practicing, a good private tutor would constantly evaluate how well you're doing, and when he or she feels that you've reached a certain level of mastery, he would then have you move from one particular topic to the other. So what's the difference between these two learning architectures? While you learn the same content, the extent of personalization, the extent of feedback, the extent of defined metrics is a lot more in this private tutor-based architecture. And it's very easy to see why on an exam such as the GMAT, where you have to be better than the next best test taker, a private tutor-based approach leads to much higher success. So let's see, why do we say that e-GMAT's built around this private tutoring-based architecture, whereas most of the other courses, even though they're audiovisual, are built around this book-based approach. We'll start with creating a study plan, and we're going to take a use case where we go from a score of 600 to a score of 720. Now, how do you go about doing that? The first thing that you need to do is you need to really create that personalized study plan. Now, to do that, you need to define what your starting abilities are. Then you need to define what abilities, to what extent you need to improve those abilities to get to that 720 score. And then the third thing that you need to define is, okay, once you know your starting abilities, once you know the extent that you need to improve your course, your scores, which all portions of the course do you need to focus on to do that? So how do you quantify your starting abilities? We've created a mock test called a Sigma X mock, in which when you take it, it gives you your abilities in sentence correction, critical reasoning, reading comprehension, arithmetic, as well as algebra, geometry. So it's the world's only mock test that does that. And what this does is it creates a numerical starting point for you. So that's how you get your starting abilities. Then how do you set your milestones? To do that, we've created this tool called GMAT Planner, which uses an AI engine to define the most efficient way for you to get to your target GMAT score. So let's see how this works. Once you take a Sigma X mock, you get your starting scores. You can enter your quant and verbal scores in that. Based on that, it'll recommend a set of target quant and target verbal scores to reach that 720 score, as is listed over here. You can see this is a target quant, target verbal score. Now, it doesn't end there. It looks at your starting subsectional abilities, and it also provides target subsectional abilities. So to reach a Q50 and a V38, what it's saying is you should really achieve 83rd percentile in arithmetic and algebra geometry. You should excel in sentence correction, should do really well in critical reasoning, and you should do above average in reading comprehension. So when you do that, you have the target milestones for that you need to achieve to hit that Q50 and that V38. Clearly, you can really see you're going to put in more effort in SC because you're aiming for a much higher target over here than you would put in reading comprehension. Now, when that happens, you have your starting milestones, you have your target milestones, then your GMAT preparation becomes a game of hitting 5 milestones. For example, in arithmetic, you have to go from a starting ability of 59th percentile to an end ability of 83rd percentile. In sentence correction, you have to go from a starting ability of 50th percentile to a target ability of 89th percentile. It then determines, based on the statistical data that we have for about 40,000 students, how much time do you need to hit those scores. And here you can really see two things. One is, your starting and your target milestones. The second is a sequence in which it expects you to execute that. The sequence works that way, as you can really see. First asks you to improve arithmetic in 1.4 weeks, then algebra in 2.4 weeks, and sentence correction in 2.1 weeks. And consequently, you can see since the improvement in RC is a lot less, it's about 0.9 weeks that it has allocated for you. So at this point, you know the amount of time you need to, and you know those starting milestones and those ending milestones over here. So when this happens, as I said, your GMAT preparation becomes a set of 5 mini preparations, each with its own starting and ending point. It then creates this calendar view for you where you can really see when do you need to study arithmetic, when do you need to study algebra, when do you need to study sentence correction, critical reasoning, how many hours do you need to put in. And this is something that you can personalize over here as well. You can put this input and this can be changed accordingly. So why do we spend a few thousand hours building this utility? So that each one of you can create a personalized study plan in 7 minutes or fewer. The next thing that a private tutor does is teaches you concepts, and remember, while teaching you concepts, that he or she gives you feedback as to how well you've learned those concepts. What you see over here is essentially a screenshot of our divisibility and remainders module. This is a module in our number properties course. Now, as you see, and again, you compare this to the divisibility and remainders module in another very popular course, which is by magoosh.com. Let's see how does the learning compare. Within the e-GMAT course, what you really see is you learn the concepts well, then you practice questions right then and there. Essentially, you learn the concept, you evaluate it right then and there. And in even these solutions that you really see you get what we call as the right information at the right time. So they're animated, there's audio visual syncing, which really happens. Compare that to the Magoosh course. What you're going to find is that learning over here is very verbose. There's very limited interactivity. It essentially is a book converted to an audio visual format. Now, the next thing that a good private tutor does is teaches you application of concepts, right, when you're learning concepts. In the e-GMAT course, we have these special entities called application files in which we teach you how to apply those concepts. Then we have practice files, which are right after these application files. So essentially, you learn a concept, you learn how to apply those concepts, you practice that concept right then and there, and you get feedback on your ability to apply that concept right then and there. We also carefully select a set of official questions for you to practice on. And this is how every module in the e-GMAT course is structured. Now, again, when you compare this with the Magoosh course, what you find is the concept of teaching application doesn't exist. It teaches you a ton of concepts. Then it gives you one quiz at the end. Again, this is not an application quiz. This is a practice quiz. You don't even get a score in your dashboard. Again, the intent is not to give you feedback, but just to give you practice. Now, why is this important? The reason why this is important is because your goal is to get to that 79th or that 83rd percentile in algebra. Your goal is not just to learn algebra. Now, the next piece is evaluation of mastery. A good private tutor ensures that you move from one topic to the other only once you've hit the target percentile. So, and to do that, in the e-GMAT platform, you don't need to take full-length mocks after you've studied number properties to figure out where you are. We built this tool called Scholarium, in which once you study number properties or arithmetic or algebra or geometry, you can take what we call as an ability quiz. When you take that ability quiz, it can tell you what your ability score is, which is something that you see over here. You see over here, and it can also tell you the areas that you need to work on. For example, in this case, this particular student clearly needs to work on functions as well as inequalities. So you can really see why do we say that most of the other courses out there are built around this book-based architecture, whereas e-GMAT's built around this private tutoring-based approach. Who's created the content that goes on in this? Some of GMAT Club's highest rated instructors have done that. Instructors who've been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club. So while only 6% of the people get to that score of 720 or higher, you can really see why do we say that a good percentage of them use e-GMAT. With that, I've come to the end of the first part of this webinar. If you want to stay updated with all things e-GMAT, if you want to stay updated with most things that go on in the B-School world, you can stay connected with me on my LinkedIn. I have upwards of 12,000 students who are connected with me. We also share about 7 articles every week. These are articles that we write that our research team writes. So yeah, with that, I'd now like to invite Pyle to start the second part of this webinar, which is how do you ace number properties. Pyle, over to you.
Thank you, Rajat, for that wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone to Number Properties webinar. Let's carry forward. So in this webinar, what we're going to talk about is how is it that you can solve every number properties questions, rather every quant question utilizing a very standard method. And for that, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you have a solid understanding of your basics, that you understand that in order to do well on quant portion of the test, you really need to have a very, very strong understanding of your basics. And obviously, as I talked about, we are going to be focusing on the structured approach to solve questions. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about here is that at e-GMAT, we don't believe in teaching shortcuts. Shortcuts are something that should come naturally to you once you get to that high level of proficiency in solving questions. Because if you're here looking for shortcuts, you're at the wrong place. But if you're here to get that key to getting to that 90th percentile in quant, then you're definitely at the right place. Okay. So that being said, let me talk about how is it that we're going to be progressing through the session. The first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to be giving you 3 data sufficiency questions, which are going to be 700 level plus questions. The point of you will ace quant. How do you know that you're acing quant? The key to the metric is that you should be able to solve difficult questions accurately, right? Because GMAT is a test of your ability, right? So that's what we are aiming towards. So I want to start off with giving you these difficult questions and seeing what your current level is in the realm of the topics that we're going to be talking about in this session. And then we will carry forward with the warm-up just to get you warmed up with the topics of divisibility and remainders. And then we'll solve some problem-solving questions, and then we'll increase the difficulty level of the problem-solving questions. And then in the end, we're going to take up the same data sufficiency questions that we gave you in the beginning, and we'll discuss those questions in quite a bit of detail towards the end. Okay, so again, just to make sure, when I'm giving you the questions here, I'm not giving you complete solutions. You're just solving these questions, and then from this point on, we'll be discussing each and every question in detail. And then when we come at the end over here, I'm going to be discussing. I'll give you another opportunity to solve these 3 questions, and then we'll discuss the solutions of these questions in detail and figure out where is it that you faltered the first time when you solved these questions. Okay. Again, throughout the session, and again, I want to say another thing. As you go through the session, you will find that, okay, I'm asking you to do things that you're not normally aware of doing. So just believe me, those things are going to work. So just trust me, follow along, and then towards the end, you will understand the utility of the structured method that I want you to understand. Okay, so that's my request. Just follow along. Now, another thing, the questions that you have for me, please put those questions in the polls that you'll see in this empty part of the window, and the questions that you have, so questions that you have for me, sorry, let me change that, sorry. The questions that I ask you, put the responses to those questions in the poll windows that you'll see over here. The questions that you have for me or for Ashutosh and Sandeep, two of my quant experts who will be supporting you, please put those questions in the Q&A pod. Okay. All right. So that being said, let's carry forward. One more thing. I usually don't time you when I give you a question. So again, this is not a test of, I'm not really putting any time constraint on you. So for that, what we'll do is whenever I ask you to solve a question, I'll ask all of you to click on still solving. That tells me how many of the 112 students who are right now there in the class are actively engaged with the question. And then when about 50% of you have already marked your answer, I give you a 30-second warning or a 15-second warning depending upon the complexity level of the question. Okay, so let's get at least 50 people to click on still solving. I would rather have all of you click on still solving, but let's at least get the number to 50. And as soon as I see that number 50 here, I'm going to show you the question so that you can go off and solve the question. All right, we're almost there. Okay, sounds good. Here you go. This is the question. All right, last 30 seconds. I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, and here comes question number 9. Can you all please click on still solving? I'll change the screen to question number 9 as soon as I get. Okay, good. There you go. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. And here comes question number 10, the last question in this section. Please click on Still Solving. All right. This is question number 10. All right, last 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so we are done with the 3 most difficult questions in this session. So let's hear a few things from you. I just want to understand how the experience was and what's your level of confidence in solving these questions. So give me just a minute here. Right, just a few seconds. So you solved these 3 questions. So tell me how confident you are of your solutions here, of your answers here rather. All right. So okay, so it's almost a 50-50 split of of the students who are not at all confident versus students who are somewhat confident or very confident. Okay, that's good. All right, now let me understand one more thing from all of you before we go into the warm-up section here. How is it that you have been preparing for Quant till now? And just want to get that poll here. Okay, give me 1 second. I need to create that poll. One minute. Okay, there you go. So tell me, how is it that you have prepared for Quant till now? And how much of Quant have you finished? Okay, official guide, taking mock Quant test, I've not yet prepared, okay. 50% OG, e-GMAT, GMAT club and official guide, okay. Using Magoosh's lessons and practice questions, okay. All right, good. Quant is strong, so I didn't prepare much, okay. All right, that is very good to know. Only sets is left, several texts, Magoosh videos, okay. All right, good to know. Now, what we're going to do in this section now is a number properties, and actually let me ask you one more question here. What's your level of confidence in divisibility and remainders as a topic? Level of confidence in divisibility and remainders as a concept. Okay, so again, somewhat confident. So more people are in the somewhat confident and confident range than in not confident at all. Okay, sounds good. Now, what we are going to do so again, the principles that we are going to be teaching you from this point on are going to be applicable, obviously, for divisibility and remainders. In addition, they are also going to be applicable to everything in Quant. Okay, obviously the concepts are going to be specific to divisibility and remainders topic. However, the method and the approach, those two things are going to be applicable across the board. So you have a lot to learn over here. So definitely be very attentive. And as I said earlier, there are going to be things that will not be natural to you right now, but just follow along with with me, and then towards the end, you will see the benefit of that. So in the warm-up section, we're going to be talking about, again, basic questions on divisibility and remainders, and I will, based on these 5 questions, I believe, I will be able to give you feedback on your conceptual understanding. And again, we won't be discussing these topics in detail. I'm just going to be briefly explaining to you the solution. Okay, so here is a question that you see on your screen. Answer this question, and let me get the poll here. Actually, let's have everyone click on still solving, please. Okay. All right. I'm going to end the poll now. The correct answer here is choice B. Now what's given to us is that Z is a 3-digit number. Okay, so that's the first thing that's given to us, whose digits are consecutive numbers. Okay, consecutive numbers. So that's information given to us about this number Z. And we need to select the correct statement. And again, statements are all with regards to the divisibility of a number by the number 3. Now tell me, what's the divisibility rule for the number 3? When is a number divisible by 3? When its sum is divisible by 3, absolutely. So when the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, that means that the number is divisible by 3. Now what do we know about the digits of this number? What we know is that the digits are consecutive numbers. So what we can do is we need to, from this information and from the information that's given in the question, so from our conceptual understanding and from the information that's given in the question, we come up with the strategy to solve this question. And the strategy is to assume that the first number is x, the first digit is x, the second digit will be x plus 1, and the third digit will be x plus 2. Okay, so the key thing is that the information from the question statement and our conceptual knowledge, both of these together tell us what is the method, what is the approach that we need to utilize to solve this question. Okay, that we need to assume the first digit to be x, which means that the second digit will be x plus 1, third will be x plus 2, which means that because I needed to calculate the sum of the digits will be 3x plus 3. Now I simplify this, and what I get is 3 times x plus 1. Which means that regardless of the value of x, this number is always going to be divisible by 3 because the 3 is outside over here. It's a multiple. Okay, it's always a multiple of 3 regardless of the value of x, which means that the correct answer is choice B. Now, about 60% of the class was able to solve this question. So for those of you who selected choice A, or who were not able to still solve the question, which step did you falter on? What did you not know? So my question is to the 40% of the class. I want you guys to tell me, for those of you who selected choice A or who weren't able to make any selection in the time provided, were you able to, were you aware of this concept rule first of all? Were you aware of the divisibility rule of the number 3? Okay, so most of you were. So then why were you not able, so if you faltered, I'm guessing you faltered because you weren't able to get to this part. How many of you who answered the question incorrectly, how many of you were not able to process this information? Were not able to get to this? That the sum of the digits of the number is x plus 1 plus x plus 2. Okay. So it appears that for those of you who were not able to solve this question, you guys faltered at this part over here, wherein you had to process the information in the question statement and you had to bring your conceptual understanding together to come up with the approach. Okay. Now, if you notice, this conceptual understanding is actually specific to divisibility and remainders. However, understanding what the question statement is saying and processing these two bits of information to come out to arrive at this is something which is applicable across the board. Right? So this is a process skill which you need to be aware of. That how is it that you combine information to come up with a method to solve the question. Okay? All right. So now let's move on to our next question. Question number 2, I'm going to bring back the poll here. First, let's click on still solving. All right, go ahead and solve the question. All right, last 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So the correct answer is choice A. Now let's go through the solution. Now what's the divisibility property of the number 4? That the last two digits should be divisible by 4. Okay. And what is given to us? It's a 4-digit number. Z is a 4-digit number whose digits are consecutive numbers, right? Now, combining, okay, so you have divisibility rule of 4 in which there are which indicates that last two digits should be divisible by 4, right? And then we know that the digits are consecutive numbers. So in this case, all we have to do is we have to assume that, okay, again, there is no sum involved, right? So which means that it won't really make sense for me to assume that, okay, the last digit is x and then so let one digit be x and the other one will be x plus 1. We don't really need to go that route. Here, because we are interested in only the last two digits of the number, what we say is that, okay, there are two cases that are possible. One is that the number could be odd, for example, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm assuming these numbers, keeping in mind what the information that's given to me. I'm not just taking these numbers at random. Okay, so again, because it's given that these numbers, that the number has consecutive digits, that's why the digits are consecutive numbers. That's why I'm assuming that, okay, this is 2, 3, 4, 5 in the first case, that when Z is odd, right? Which means that if Z is odd, then this number will not be divisible by 4, right? So I have one case in which Z is not divisible by 4. So definitely choice B goes out the window. Okay. Now I know that, okay, Z could be even as well. Now there are two cases. Now this is where I have to consider that, okay, not all, I have to apply my conceptual understanding to know which indicates that not all even numbers are divisible by 4, right? So here the last two digits may be divisible by 4, for example 56 here, or the last two digits may not be divisible by 4, for example 34. Right? So I need to come up with these combinations of consecutive numbers that are either divisible by 4 or not divisible by 4, but that are even. Right? So which means that I do have cases in which Z is divisible by 4. I do have cases in which Z is not divisible by 4 when Z is even, which means that the correct answer is choice A. Okay? So if you notice over here, my approach to the question, how I am solving the question, changes in this one. Why? Because the information that's given to me, the question is asking me about the divisibility with 4, which means that I need to now think about cases that exist within the constraints of the information that's given to me in the question statement. Okay. Does the solution make sense? Any doubts about that? And again, these are as basic a question as you can get. Okay, so the very fact that the accuracy for these questions is lower than 75% tells me that, okay, there is some level of either conceptual gap or how to just process information that is lacking in some of you. Okay, so again, I'm going to give you a collective feedback towards the end when we are done with the warm-up section. Okay, so for now, let's move on to our next question, question number 3. This is slightly more easy than the other two questions. Yeah, let's go ahead. Can you please click on still solving? All right, I'm going to end the poll now. The correct answer here is indeed choice C. Now this is a question in which you can simply process the numbers, right? So there isn't much to it apart from just knowing what the divisibility rule of 8 is. Last 3 digits should be divisible by 8. You've been given this number 897. You take the remainder. This number 897 remainder 8 gives you is 1. So you simply see which is the closest number that's divisible by 8, and that's 896. So relatively straightforward question. Okay. So now this is where things get a little bit more interesting, and let's this is 4 choices. Okay, can you please click on still solving? Okay, here you go. All right, last 10 seconds. I'm going to end the poll now. Now, most of you got this question correct, so good job at that. Now, I'd like to understand how is it that you solved the question, and I'm going to walk you through. So how many of you actually, okay, let me broadcast the results here. Choice D is the correct answer here, and I'm going to show you my solution. But first, I'd want to understand from you, how many of you calculated the answer here? Now, what's the number when divided by 204 gives the remainder 3, and then, so how many of you did the calculation here? Okay. Okay, all right, so let me walk you through the process that I use to solve this question. So I'm applying the concept that the dividend is equal to divisor times quotient plus remainder. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Now I utilize what's been asked of me is that what is the remainder when this number n is divided by 4. Okay, so what I'm doing is n is equal to 4p plus r. Okay, so far so good? Yes? So far so good? I'm simply taking the information that's given to me, that's been asked of me, and I'm converting that, translating that into an equation. Okay, based on, so I'm applying this concept plus this information that's given to me. I'm combining those two to arrive at this equation. Okay, next, what's given to me, I'm doing the same thing with the given information, right? So n is equal to 204q plus 3. Okay, so that's what I take. Now what I have to do is, this equation is given to me, and this is what r is what has been asked from me, right? So all I have to do is, can I express the equation over here, n is equal to 204q plus 3, in the form of this equation over here, so that I can get the value of r. And what does that translate into? What that translates into is that, look at this, you have n here on one side, n here on one side, right? You have a number that's a multiple of 204, a number that's multiple of 4. And then you have a number 3 that is not a multiple of 204, and then you have a standalone number here r, which is also not a multiple of 4. right? So essentially there are lots of similarities between these two equations, and I try to use the similarities to my favor to find the solution. Okay, and this is what ends up happening. If you notice, 204 is nothing but a multiple of 4. So essentially this equation in its current form itself is of the form n is equal to 4p plus r. How many of you are with me so far? How I am drawing the similarities between these two equations. Okay, so that's it. 204q can be written as 4p because 204 is already a multiple of 4. So this equation is already in the form that I want it to be, which means that the remainder is r. Okay, and over here I've just shown some more processing for people to visualize the same. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm not assuming any numbers. So a number of you over here said that you plugged in the number and you calculated, right? I'm not doing any of that. Okay, all I'm doing over here is coming to certain equations by utilizing my conceptual understanding and by reading the question statement properly. This is a result of that step. Okay, and then just making without even putting my pen on the paper, I'm just observing these two equations and I'm seeing, okay, what is it that I need? Okay, and what I need is to see whether I can express 204q in terms of 4p. Okay, how did we get 51? That's simply, so 51 times 4 is 204. So I'm just saying that 204 is a multiple of 4. I'm just making that observation. Over here, as I said, I'm just doing all the working out. Okay. So this is, how many of you utilize methods such as this, which is as step by step as this, as what you see on the screen? Okay, and this is something which I want you to embrace. This is what I was talking about early on, that you are going to be seeing certain things in this session that you're not used to doing. Because a lot of what we do, a lot of what I see students do is brute force calculations, plugging in numbers. Again, plugging in numbers is not a bad strategy, but only when you reach to a certain point in your solution. Okay, because you need to have a very clear idea of what numbers you choose to plug in, because there is a skill involved in that as well. Okay, now whereas when you approach questions in this manner, wherein you make certain observations and then you essentially utilize the information that's given to you in your to your advantage, right? So here I'm just making certain observations and I'm arriving at my solution, and that is what GMAT is testing you on. GMAT doesn't really want to see whether you are able to make calculations or whether you're able to plug in numbers. It's looking for some strategies that you can apply, some solid strategies. Okay, so what I request all of you now is, from next question onwards, try to do the processing, the manner in which I've shown you processing for this question. Okay, because ultimately your goal is to solve 700 level questions, and you need to start building your process skills from easier questions onward, so that by the time you get to those difficult questions, the process has become very, very natural to you. Okay, does this make sense? Again, we'll be solving lots of questions, so even if it doesn't make sense a whole lot right now, it's okay. But again, for those of you, oh good, it makes sense to all of you. That's really nice. All right, so here is your next question. Question number 5. Okay, sorry. Let's get the poll here. Go ahead, please click on still solving. All right, here you go. All right. I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So first of all, let me ask you, what process did you use? Did you try to use the process for question number 4 that I'd used for question number 4? Okay, good. I'm very happy to see that. All right, now, technically, I would say, okay, technically, only 56% of the class got the question correct. But if I look at the answer choice that the remaining 36% selected, I would say you guys missed out on a very, very important part which costed you this question. But because you made that mistake, I know that you're not going to repeat that mistake ever again. Okay, so let me walk you through the solution first and then you will understand. But for most of you, if you've used the method that I used for question number 4, then you are on the right path, okay, which I believe that all of you did use that particular method. So let me walk you through the solution here again. Same thing, dividend is equal to divisor into quotient plus remainder. What's given to me, what's been asked of me is the remainder r when n is divided by 5. So I simply utilize these 2 bits of information to come up with my equation here. The other thing that's given to me is n is equal to 205q plus 6, okay? And now I simply make certain observations. Now what is the observation that I'm making here? What is the observation here between these 2 equations? I think all of you made that observation when you solved the question. The observation is that 205 is a multiple of 5. Okay, that's the observation. Absolutely, 5 is a factor of 205. That's another way of saying it, which means that this equation is already in the form of the equation that I needed from the question statement. Okay, now, which means that r is equal to 6. Okay, so again, this what we are doing over here, over here is simply process of visualization. This process skill of visualization is a very, very important process skill that's applicable across all quant questions, regardless of the section of that particular quant question. And I want you to make a note of this. Okay. All right. So a process skill of visualization, all of you did well here. Now, which means that r is equal to 6. However, where 40% of the class faltered on was that you missed out on this constraint here that the remainder is always less than the divisor. Okay, which is why the remainder cannot be 6. How can remainder of some number divided by 5 be 6? That's not possible. Okay, which means that you have to divide 6 again by 5 and what you get is the remainder 1. So the correct answer here is 1. So a very simple mistake, but a very costly mistake. Imagine if you did everything, there was a lot of processing to be required here, a lot of visualization skills, but in the end you faltered at this point wherein you didn't consider the constraint. That would be so bad, right? But again, these things happen, and that's why this is another process skill that you need to be aware of. Apply constraints. Okay, constraints can be of either conceptual nature. Over here, this constraint is of conceptual nature, wherein you know from your understanding of the concept that remainder is less than 5. That remainder is less than the divisor. Okay, a constraint can be provided to you in the question statement as well. Okay, and we'll look at those examples in this session. Okay, but you need to be aware, you need to build your skill set in both of these process skills, okay? Visualization and applying constraints. And again, as I said, these 2 process skills are not just applicable to divisibility and remainders, they're applicable to number properties in general and all of the sections in quant. Is this point clear, guys? Yes or no? Guys and girls? Okay. Now, one thing that I do want to tell you is that there is a lot of focus on simply teaching the concepts, right? And again, in learning the concepts. But the focus on these process skills is really lacking in the test prep material that's available outside today. So I want to draw your attention to the applicability of these process skills and to the importance of these process skills, and that's something that you can learn utilizing the e-GMAT course, okay? Because each and every solution, because we do not believe that shortcuts work, because we are sticklers of a process, of the process, right? That's why we make sure that we find commonalities in the process that is used, that can be used across the board for all quant questions, and that's how we've been able to come up with these process skills that are transferable across, that are applicable across all quant questions, right? So these are the process skills that will help you to ultimately solve those 700 level questions that you intend to solve, okay? Thank you for that positive feedback here. I really appreciate this. Really appreciate that. e-GMAT has the best process. Okay. All right. So now with this, so I had a question here. Could you please explain the second step again? 6 is equal to 5 times 1 plus 1 equation. So all I'm doing over here is, because the remainder cannot be greater than the divisor. Remember, the divisor is 5 here, right? So remainder cannot be greater than the divisor, which means that to find the actual remainder, I need to divide 6 again by 5, which gives me the remainder 1. Okay, so I believe if you're asking me that doubt, there is some conceptual, there is some lack in your conceptual understanding. So for that, please go through the divisibility concepts in the e-GMAT course, and you will be able to address those conceptual gaps. Okay. All right. So overall feedback that I want to give you is that you need to have that 200% clarity in the concepts, okay? That is very, very important, because again, if you are, and let me ask you this question, how many of you got the questions, how many questions did you get correct? Let me see if I have my poll here. No, I don't. Okay. Just 1 minute. I'm just creating the poll so that we can get the answers here. There were 5 warm-up questions, and I want to know how many warm-up questions did you get correct? Did you answer correctly? Okay, so for those of you who got fewer than 5 questions correct, okay, my feedback to you would be that you need to revise your concepts, okay? Either the concepts, or based on the feedback that I gave you as I was going through the solutions, you need to work on those process skills, okay? So that's my feedback. Now for those of you who got fewer than 3 questions correct, again, there is a big conceptual gap that you have. Go through the e-GMAT content so that you can bridge those gaps, okay? Because again, you need to have not just 100% clarity. When I say 200% clarity, what do I mean? Okay, isn't 100% clarity enough? What do I mean by 200% clarity? By that, what I mean is that 100% clarity would be absolutely understand and able to apply absolutely correctly, absolutely correct. 100% clarity would be that you know that you're aware of the concept, that you know that remainder cannot be less than the remainder cannot be greater than or equal to the divisor, right? But that 200% clarity comes when you can utilize that concept to arrive at what you want to do. You can apply that concept. Over here in this part, I'm actually applying that concept, which means that I have that 200% clarity in this concept. I know there is something that I need to do, but as soon as I see the number 6 here as a remainder, I know, oh, 6 cannot be my remainder because my remainder has to be less than 5. That is what I mean by 200% clarity. Okay, not just knowing the concept, not just being aware of the concept, but knowing when to reproduce that, when to recollect that concept and apply that concept. Okay? Alright, so with this now we come to slightly more difficult questions. We are going to be solving 650 level questions now. So here's the first question. Let me bring the poll. There are 5 choices here. Okay, before I show you the next set of questions, how is it going so far? You've solved 5 easy questions, 3 very difficult questions. How is it going so far? And you've listened to my lecture a little bit here, a small part of my lecture here. So let's get a pulse of the class before we move on to this next section. Okay. Still following, that's good, very nice. Need to review the concepts again. Good, very nice. It's really nice to see. Excited for more questions. Yes, there are quite a few more questions. Thank you very much, guys. All right. So here's your first question here. Go ahead. Oh, you guys have already clicked on still solving. Some more still solving, please. There are 102 students right now. Okay, go ahead, solve the question. All right, last 15 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. So the correct answer is choice C. Now let me ask you this. How many of you calculated this versus how many of you utilized the equations? So answer yes if you did the calculation here. That is if you calculated m is equal to 8.2 times 30. Answer no if you simply utilize the equations. Okay, so more number of students did the calculation. Okay, for this question it's okay. Okay, but as I solve this question and I show you the process for the next question, from the next question onwards, I would want you to not do calculations. Okay, so let's go through this. Again, my same equation, I'm coming up, I come up with m is equal to 15p plus r. That's what I'm required to find out r. R is less than 15, right? Now what's given to me is m divided by 30 is equal to 8.2. So I take 30 on the other side and I say m is equal to 30 times 8.2. So now what I have to do is, again, I have to apply my visualization skill. I'm given 30 times 8.2 and over here I'm given 15p plus r. So technically, what thought process should go on in my mind? What should go on in my mind is, how can I express this number in terms of two numbers, one of which is multiple of 15 and the other is not a multiple of 15. Do you agree with that? Translation of my visualization in English. What am I visualizing? My thought process is, I'm going to repeat this because this is important and I want you to apply this for all the questions that you see in this session. And again, this is how you build your process skill of visualization. Okay. Now, one more thing, as I'm telling you this, because this is something new to you, I want to make sure that you keep your mind open to absorb this. Okay. Yes, you can solve this question over here with the numbers that are given. You can solve this question very easily by doing the calculations that you did. But for the lack of better expression, that is a brute force way of calculating. And that calculation or that method of solving is not going to help you solve those 700 plus level questions. Okay. And again, always keep that end goal in mind. Your goal is to be able to solve those 700 plus level questions. Okay. And that is what we are working towards. Okay. Now, I'm going to repeat what my thought process for the visualization is. How can I express this equation over here, this number over here, 30 times 8.2, such in terms of two numbers, sum of two numbers, one of which is a multiple of 15 and the other one is not a multiple of 15. I'm reading R as not a multiple of 15. Okay, because if R is a multiple of 15, then R is technically equal to 0, which means because this entire expression of M is a multiple of 15, right? So now I start my processing now. Okay, first of all, I'm not going to do the calculation here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to split 8.2 as 8 and 0.2. Okay, and I'm going to express it as 30 times 8 plus 30 times 0.2. Everyone with me on this? How I did this part here? Okay. Now I do my visualize. So I'm carrying forward with my visualization. I'm trying to bring the terms here. So I'm trying, because I need multiple of 15 there. So what I'm doing is 30 is nothing but 15 times 2. Right, so I take 15 outside here, I get 2 times 8, and then 30 times 0.2 is nothing but 6. So there you have it. I have one term that is a multiple of 15, the other term that is not a multiple of 15, and what I get is remainder as 6. Okay, the correct answer is 6. Okay, everyone get the solution? Okay, for those of you who have doubts with the solution, please post your doubts in the Q&A part so that Ashutosh and Sandeep can help you out with that. Okay? All right. But one thing that I do want to ask you is, for those of you who are who have gotten the method, is this method difficult? First of all, tell me. It's not difficult. Is it intuitive? Is it logical? Is the method logical here? Good. And again, do you see that this kind of visualization can help you with other topics in Quant as well? Okay, good, good. You need practice, absolutely. You need practice, and that is why you need to have those solutions that utilize these methods, and that's what you find in e-GMAT questions and solutions. We don't solve questions just for the sake of solving. We solve questions in our course to make sure that we equip you to get to that skill level such that you can solve those 700 level questions. And I was waiting for someone to make a comment about the time pressure. You're absolutely right. Under time pressure, it is hard to visualize at times. You're absolutely right, but that happens only if you haven't prepared in the right manner, only if while learning the concepts, while preparing, you haven't built those process skills. Okay, and again, keep what the end goal is. You need to be able to solve those 700 questions, and it is not possible to solve those 700 level questions without building these process skills. Okay. All right, so we now carry forward. And again, any other questions that you have with regards to the solution of question 1, please put them in the Q&A pod. Okay. So let's move on to our next question. Now this question, similar one to the previous one, just some numbers have been changed. I want you to apply the visualization process. Okay. Think about what it is that you would say in English and then apply that and then execute that in mathematics. Okay. So let's bring back the poll here. Can you please click on still solving? Okay, here you go. Okay, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Very nice. 76% of the class got this question correct. Okay, and these questions are getting a little bit more tricky. Now, tell me, how many of you use the visualization method? Very nice. How many of you use the calculation method? I know it's a redundant question. Very nice. Good. I'm so happy, and I have done this session a couple of times. I must say one thing. This group is a lot more has welcomed this process a lot better than the other groups. Usually I get to see from question number 4 onwards that people start to embrace the process, but that is really good. I'm very happy to see that. Good. Very effective to leverage visualization method. Absolutely right. You know, when you have this method, and so let me first go through the solution here so that you can verify that you did this, you solved the question in the right manner. So again, m is equal to 30p plus r. So that's what I need to find out, and I need to find r from this, and what's given to me over here is m is equal to 15 into 8.2. So what I need to find out is, I'm going to repeat this in English, how can I express 15 times 8.2 in terms of sum of two numbers, one of which is multiple of 30 and the other is not a multiple of 30. Okay, that's what I have to do. Right? So I start doing that. I split it into 15 times 8, 15 times 0.2. Now 8 I can write as 15 times 2 times 4, right? So I can write this first term in this manner, and then 15 times 0.2 is 3, and there I have it. R is equal to 3. Okay, so good. Now let's move forward to our next question. Get to question number 3 now. A little bit more processing in question number 3. Okay, so let's carry forward. Can you please click on still solving? Again, not to sound like a broken record, but don't do calculations, solve it with the visualization method. Okay, let's go ahead. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay. The correct answer is choice E. So good job at that. Let's go through the solution. Same thing, 15 times 9 plus 15 times 0.2. I have to now process this a bit more. Now, if you notice here, there is something more that's going on over here. 15 times 9, in the previous ones, I could either break up 15 into as a multiple of 2, or I could break up, in the previous one, the number here instead of 9 was 8, so I could do 8 times 4. In this case, this is not an even number, right? But I need to see if I can extract some multiple of 30 from here, right? So what I do is I break down 9 in terms of 8 plus 1, in terms of an even number plus an odd number here, right? So when I do that, what I get is 15 times 8 plus 15 times 1 plus 3. Okay, now I have separated the non multiples of 30 parts, and I have the multiple of 30 over here. So I get 30 times 4 plus 15 plus 3. So 18 is the correct answer. So again, nothing major that's going on over here, but there is just some more a little bit more of processing that's needed over here in this step. Just thinking about it, that 9 needs to be split into 8 plus 1, because I really cannot extract multiples of 30 from just the number 15 and 9. I need to do a little bit more of processing to get there. Okay? Is this point clear, yes or no? And again, the more you practice on such questions which go in progressively increasing degree of application of your visualization skill, the more you hone your skill. Because if I just tell you this, it's very straightforward to you. There is nothing much involved there, but you need to be able to figure that out on your own. And for that, you need to be made aware of this, of the progression of this process skill. Okay? All right. So I have a question. How do we choose 8 plus 1? Again, that's where you need to build the skill. Over here in this case, you know that you have to arrive at a multiple of 30, which means that you need to have an even number multiplied by 15. Right? So manipulation of numbers is what you need to learn. Right? And that is what you'll get when you go through the questions in the e-GMAT course, because each and every solution of ours is based on this process over here. Okay. All right. So let's go through our next question. Okay. So we are done with this section here. So let's just do a quick overview of questions 1 through 3. Okay. Progressively increasing degree of application, as I said earlier, right? Now, if you notice, as we went from question 1 to 2 to 3 in this section, you can see that the number of steps of processing progressively increased. There's a single step here, there are 2 steps here, and then here there are more steps, right? And again, logically, everything is the same. It's just that the complexity of application is increasing a little bit, and that's what you need to hone your process skill towards. All right. Now let's move on to our next question, next set here, which are difficult problem solving questions. Now the stuff that we'll talk about in this section is more applicable to divisibility and remainders, but frankly, the principles of that application can be applied across the board through all quant sections. Okay. So let's just make sure that if everyone is comfortable with the concept of divisibility equation, right? Now we're going to be building upon your understanding of this concept. So I'll give you this scenario. What is the remainder when 31 plus 43 is divided by 7? Okay, tell me the answer. Do your processing and tell me the answer. Absolutely. 4 is the answer. Now tell me, how did you solve this question? The remainder is 4. Now tell me, how did you solve this question? There are two ways of doing this. One is either you calculate the sum first and then divide it by 7, okay, or you first divide by 7 and then calculate the remainders by adding the remainders up. So which method did you use? Let me get the poll here. Method 1 or sequence 1 or sequence 2? So almost an equal split, I would say, between sequence 1 and 2. And you're right, when there's addition involved, you can do either of the two statements, either of the two sequences. For larger numbers, I would say sequence 2 would be more convenient because you are dividing smaller numbers, right, first, and then you're adding the remainders. But again, it's really up to you. It's a personal preference. It's a judgment call that you have to make. Now let's switch this question a bit, and instead of sum, let's do product, and then tell me what the answer is. Absolutely, the answer is 3. Now tell me, which sequence will you use? Sequence 1 or sequence 2? Absolutely, sequence 2, because sequence 1 is going to be really complicated. Okay, so essentially the thing over here is I'm using numbers, smaller numbers here, to tell you this application here that you can add and multiply remainders. Okay, that's what I'm telling you here. And again, there is a full reasoning behind why you can do that, and it comes from the application of your divisibility and remainder equation. Okay, I'm not going to go through the details of this, but when I share the presentation with you, you can go through these details as to why is it possible to add and multiply remainders. Okay, but is everyone clear about this? Let me get the yes no poll here. Is everyone clear about this, that you can add and multiply remainders? So I would say come to the derivation of it on your own and then check the PDF that I share with you to make sure that you're able to arrive at this on your own correctly. Okay. All right. Now what's next? Let's try to apply that principle over here on question number 4. So can you click on still solving? All right, let's go ahead. All right, last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Now I'm going to say something here. Just because I told you about this concept that you can add and multiply remainders doesn't mean that you don't visualize. Okay. So let me ask you this. How many of you spend some time just looking at what the numbers are? And what is it that you observe from the numbers? What do you observe in the numbers, from the numbers? "24 is a multiple of 3. Yes, absolutely. So what does that mean? Does it just mean that the first one has no remainder, or does it mean, what does that mean? First one definitely has no remainder. Absolutely. How many of you made the observation that 24 is a multiple of 3, and in your mind you process that, again, the remainders will be multiplied, so remainders can be multiplied, so but the remainder from 24 is 0, which means I don't even need to worry about what the remainder from 38 is. How many of you did that thought process, went through that thought process? Okay, and this is where it's very, very important. I'm glad that you are being very honest here. Okay, so how many of you calculated what is the remainder of 38 by 3? How many of you found that number out? Okay, about half of the class, so you didn't need to. And again, that's the beauty of visualization, right? You know, over here, what you are applying over here is that you can multiply the remainders, right? But you observe here that, okay, 24 remainder, this product itself, complete product itself, is divisible by 3, so you don't even need to go anywhere else. You just spend a few seconds just observing the number. Now, yes, obviously things would have been completely different if this 24 was 25. That goes without saying. Then obviously you have to do all the processing. But right now, just observe the numbers. Just translate the question in terms of plain English. What I have to find out is 24 cubed times 38 to the power 5. What is the remainder when this number is divided by 3? Oh, 24 is already divisible by 3, so remainder is 0. That's it. Does that make sense? Again, it's very important for you to spend some time with the question. Okay, it's very important for you to just observe the question. Making observation is very important before you even start to think about, okay, what is the strategy that I need to apply? Okay, all right, so let's go on to our next question now. So a couple of you are saying negative remainders. Again, you don't have to go the negative remainders route here. We'll talk about negative remainders shortly, but in this case, it's very important the point of this question is that I want you to spend some time with the question statement, just a few seconds absorbing numbers. The numbers are there for a specific reason. The test makers don't just put numbers randomly, right? They select numbers with a certain rationale in their mind, right? So spend some time with the numbers. So think about it this way: if the test maker has taken the time to select those numbers, the least I can do is just read those numbers and process those numbers before I start doing my approach determination and whatnot. Okay. All right. So let's move on to our next question here. Now you see 25 as the number. Okay, so go ahead and solve this question. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. You guys are getting better and better at this. Okay, the correct answer is oh, sorry about that. What did I do here? Sorry. One second here. Okay. So here again, this is the calculation. We got 8 over here, but I'm glad that, well, 8 wasn't an option here. So you selected choice C as the correct answer. How many of you went through this process that you see on the screen? Good, very nice. So you guys are getting comfortable with this? Yes, no? Good. Are you more comfortable with such questions now than what you were before this session? Good. And what has made the difference? What has made the difference? Variation in questions, practice and application, and solving questions not by brute force, observation, absolutely. Simplified approach. Absolutely, and that's what you get with the e-GMAT course. The questions are in progressive difficulty level. The questions are put in at the right place, right? So we teach you the concept, and then we teach you the application of those concepts. And the first question that you're going to solve in every file is going to be the easiest, and then as you proceed with in that file, you're going to see progressively difficult questions coming your way. And the solutions that you're going to be seeing, they're all going to be more, they are not going to be brute force solution. The goal of a solution is not to simply solve that question. The goal of the solution is to build your conceptual understanding, is to build your process understanding. That is the goal, and that goal, it's by itself makes all the difference in the kind of solution that you see in official guide or on GMAT Club or in other test prep resources that you all utilize. How many of you have seen solutions such as these through the preparation material that you've been using other than the e-GMAT prep material? Right, and you need to utilize this kind of platform in order for you to improve to that next level. All right, so that being said, let's move on to our next section here. Why is this thing not moving? Yes, so the calculations can be simplified extensively, right? All you have to do is you need to be aware of these, and then you need to apply these at the right place. And this process skill is what I call as simplification process skill. And we essentially apply this process skill across the board, across all topics of quant. Now let's come to negative remainders, okay? Negative remainder as a concept is obviously very, very specific to negative remainders concept itself. And it's utilized for certain types of questions. So again, this is the only topic here which has a very limited applicability. It has applicability only for divisibility and remainders. But you'll see the manner in which we arrive at this, it's very logical, right? So the very fact that the mere action of arriving at negative remainders corollary is going to help you with those visualization skills. Okay, so let's go through this. Now, you know that your remainder is less than the divisor, right? And remainder is greater than or equal to 0. That is something that we all understand. So if we see 5 remainder 2, that is what? 1. Because you're writing 5 as 2 times 2 plus 1, right? Everyone with me over here? 5 remainder 2 is 1. Now 8 remainder 3 is 2. Why? Because we write 8 as 3 times 2 plus 2, right? So these remainders work on utilizing our constraints that the remainder is always less than the divisor and that the remainder is more than or equal to 0, right? But how about if instead of writing 5 as 2 times 2 plus 1, I wrote 5 as 2 times 3 minus 1. I can write 5 like this, yes? I can write 5 in this manner, right? Likewise, I can write 8 as 3 times 3, which is 9 minus 1. So here, I'm processing negative remainders here. And that too specifically negative 1 as the remainder. Okay? And this is what I call as negative remainders. Because sometimes for ease of processing, we can utilize negative remainders. However, GMAT's understanding of remainder always remains the same, that remainder has to be greater than or equal to 0, which means that after we are done processing the negative remainder, we have to convert them into positive remainders. Okay, and for that we add and subtract the divisor, and essentially, yeah, for that we ultimately end up, and I'm not going to be going through the details of this, I'll share the PDF with you and you will follow along and understand. So how you convert a negative remainder into a positive remainder is by simply adding back the divisor. Okay, and you can see the processing of it in this part of the slide. Okay, so I want you to spend some time on this slide after I share the PDF with you. Okay, now right now I know some of you may be scratching your head. How many of you are thinking, why are you talking about negative remainders? Why do I have to go through, if ultimately I have to bring back the negative remainder as a positive remainder, then why are we taking negative remainders in the first place? And that is really for ease of processing, and I will show you the application of it. Okay, but again, my request to you is that when I share the PDF with you, when you sit back with this PDF once again, just make sure that you go through this slide so that you follow along how we are doing this processing. Okay, now let's take this question over here, and I'm going to do this question with actually, why don't you solve this question on your own? Try using negative remainder concept over here, right? But if you're not able to, I'll demonstrate the method on this question, and I'm pretty sure on the next question you'll be able to solve it. Okay, so go ahead and solve this question. Last few seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, so how many of you, the correct answer is choice D, so good. How many of you were able to apply the negative remainder concept here? Okay, let's solve this then. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm splitting this up, right? I know that the remainders can be added and multiplied, right? But I also know that the remainder for this entire term is 0. So what I really have to figure out is that what is the remainder when 17 is divided, when 17 raised to the power 17 is divided by 3, okay? Now again, I can take the 7 out because again, remainders can be multiplied. So what I do is 17 is equal to 3 times 6 minus 1. I'm writing it as 3 times 6 minus 1 instead of writing it as 3 times 5 plus 2. So I'm not using plus 2 as the positive remainder. I'm using minus 1 as the negative remainder. Why? Because I need to do processing further. What I have to do is I have to multiply minus 1 raised to the power, I have to raise the remainder by the power 7 to calculate my answer. And if I raise 2 to the power 7, and I'll get a big number, then I'll have to divide that by 3 again to find my remainder. Right, so it's much easier for me to do the processing with this negative remainder. What I get is minus 1 raised to the power 7 is nothing but minus 1. I convert that to positive remainders by simply adding 3 back. 3 is my divisor, and I get 2 as the answer. Versus if I had to go this route, I would have had to calculate 2 to the power 7, divide that number by 3, and then get to the answer. Right, so how many of you used 2 to calculate the answer? 2 as the remainder. Okay, so then you did actually calculate 2 to the power 7? Okay. Okay, so if you have a little different approach, please put that in the Q&A part so that Sandeep and Ashutosh can do that. Now, would skipping the raising to power give us an incorrect answer? Absolutely, yes, it will. And take up some numbers and do that on your own. Okay. Where does the plus 3 come from? Okay, the plus 3 comes from the processing that I want you to do on your own. And again, I'm going to show you over here. You always have to convert the negative remainder back to positive remainder, and to do that you add back the divisor. And again, why we are adding back the divisor is something that I've explained over here in this section, and that's what I want you to do on your own after when I share the PDF with you. Okay, so now can you all see, now that I've gone through this solution, can you all see the applicability of negative remainders, how negative remainders can simplify your calculations? And more specifically, -1 as the remainder, because you can multiply 1, -1 with -1 and all you have to worry about is the sign, right? Now, in this case, yes, raising 2 to the power 7 wasn't that big a deal, that you can do that. But imagine if instead of 2 as the remainder was, let's say, 5, or remainder was 7, or remainder was 3, or instead of 7 as the power, let's say the power was 13, right? Then again, things start to get a whole lot complicated. Okay? All right. Okay, so now let's apply the same thing on this question as well. Try, now that I've walked you through this process, so try applying the negative remainder concept, because that is going to be very, very helpful for you as we solve the data sufficiency questions towards the end. Okay? All right. Very nice. 82% of the class got the question correct. Here's the solution. How many of you use the solution that you see on the screen? Follow the method that you see on the screen. Good. Any comments about the negative remainder concept here? You're understanding it. You can see the application. You understand the method but don't get why. If you don't get the why, then you please go through the slide that I showed you. The addition, again, you are using both the methods. It's not that you use one over the other. It's just that it makes your processing simplified. Okay? Okay. What if the power of 17 was even? 17 was even? Yeah, then in that case, the answer will be 1. The remainder will be 1. Because minus 1 raised to the power 8, let's say if it's 8, minus 1 raised to the power 8 will be 1. Then your remainder is 1. That's it. Okay? Alright guys, so now we are on to our 700 level questions. Okay, so let's start with that. This is the question. I'm going to give you another chance to solve this question. Go ahead, please click on still solving. Okay, go ahead. All right, I'm going to end the poll now. So I can see a marked improvement in this in the responses to this question. Earlier, only about the correct answer here is choice A. Let me start with that. And earlier, when you guys answered this poll, only about 25% of people selected choice A. Okay, so tell me, do you yourself feel confident about, and I know that there are certain people who have still not selected the correct answer, and that's okay, we'll talk about this. But for those of you, how many of you feel more confident about their responses now that I've told you that choice A is the correct answer? Okay, good. And what has made the difference? Why have you, and I'll solve this question, but what made the difference in your approach to this question or in your confidence? What concept and what knowledge? Knowing what is needed to find the remainder, the understanding of the concept, okay. The visualization process, absolutely. Okay, good. So let's do this now. We need to find p remainder m when m is greater than 1, right? So statement 1, p is equal to m plus 1 raised to the power 8. Now we know that all I have to do is um, I have to find the remainder of m plus 1 with m. So I can simply, p is m plus 1, right? M plus 1 raised to the power 8. I have to find p remainder m. So all I have to do is I can find the remainder of m plus 1 by m and raise that to the power 8, right? So I'm again over here, I'm applying my simplification skills here because I know this as the concept. I'm basically utilizing that to simplify my calculations, right? So m plus 1 raised to the power, remainder m will always give me the number 1, right? Remainder will always be 1. So 1 raised to the power 8 is nothing but 1. So I can find the answer. Now, if I take a look, so statement 1 is sufficient, right? Statement 2, m is equal to 8, it tells me nothing about p. So I really can't do anything with statement 2. So statement 2 is not sufficient. The correct answer is A. So over here, it's very straightforward that this choice C, as someone said, is a trap here. Why? Because you would, if you don't know the concepts, you simply take a look at P, and here first statement has two variables P and M. Second statement has one variable M. So with both the statements, I can actually calculate the answer, and that is absolutely wrong. Okay, because if you're simply utilizing that, then you're not applying your knowledge of these other concepts that you have. Okay, and that is where you are missing out the big picture. Okay, now if you look at it, this is a 700 level question. Yes, it is. And your responses to this 700 level question earlier was that you were only 25% of the class selected the correct answer. Okay, but now that you've been equipped, and again, this is what I want you to understand. What makes a question a 700 level question? That less than 50% of all the test takers, fewer than 50% of all the test takers can answer that question correctly. That is what defines a 700 level question. Okay, now when you, and again, why does that happen? Because all the test takers don't prepare in the right manner. Right? Now, you guys, when you solve the question up front, you were not able to solve the question correctly. But now that you have prepared in a certain manner, now that you've been exposed to those progressively increasing difficult questions, you've been exposed to these concepts, these skills. Now when you solve the question, you were able to solve this question, and now you've come to that degree that, okay, now you can solve difficult questions if you have the right kind of knowledge. Does this make sense? Okay, so you're competing against all these test takers, right? All right, so now let's move on to our question number 9. Let's try that out. Okay, last few seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Okay, now this question, I don't see that much improvement in the solution here, although I've seen a shift in the responses. So let me broadcast the results here. So question number 9, the poll that says question number 9, this was your initial response, the first time when you solved the question. And at that time, quite a few of you were not able to solve the question as well. Many of you selected choice E. So that is a major shift now, that more people think that choice A is sufficient, statement 1 is sufficient than what thought earlier. But still there is that, so I believe that you were able to process statement 1 properly, but statement 2 is where things are still a little difficult. Okay, so which means that, again, I'm just making that hypothesis based on the responses that I see here, and you will tell me if my hypothesis is correct. So I believe that you were able to apply the negative remainder concept for statement 1. Is that correct? Or for the question statement, I would say. You were able to apply the negative remainder concept to analyze the question statement. Okay, good. And this is something which you were not able to do earlier. Is that correct? Absolutely. So good. So there is a marked improvement here. And again, I want you guys to have that level of confidence, right? That if you're learning something the right way, you are able to apply that in the context of 700 level question. Okay. And again, if you faltered in statement number 2, that's because we haven't really talked about prime numbers a whole lot in this session. Now, had you been given that kind of information, you would have been able to solve statement number 2 properly as well. So enough of that. Let's go through the solution. Okay. So question statement analysis, that's the key to this question here. 38 38 raised to the power n squared remainder 13. That's what you have to find out. So I'm going to write down, now we know about from the conceptual understanding that we have that I can simply do 38 remainder 13 and then raise that to the power n square. Now the minute I see n square here, right, it should tell me that, okay, I need to be utilizing negative remainders, because if I have negative 1 remainder specifically, right, because if I have a positive remainder, then again, I'll have to, that's a number that I'm dealing with, right? So luckily, and again, it's not really luck here. The test maker has consciously selected the number 38 and 13 so that you can utilize that negative 1 remainder here. That's a conscious decision by the test maker. Okay, he wants you to apply that particular method here. Okay, so instead of having 12 as the remainder, right? So what you get is minus 1 raised to the power n square. Now you have two cases. You need to figure out the remainder, right? Now remainder, if n is odd, is going to be different than when n is even. So if n is odd, which means that the power of minus 1 is odd, which means that you'll have minus 1 raised to the power odd number is minus 1. You'll have to convert that back into positive remainder by adding 13, which is your divisor. You get 12 as the remainder, versus if n is even, then the remainder is simply minus 1 raised to the power even number, which is 1. So in that case, your remainder is 1. So now you need to figure out, essentially what you need to find out is if n is even or odd. That is what you need to find out from the question statement to answer the question, right? Now, how many of you were able to arrive at this analysis of question statement, that what you need to find out is n even or odd? Good. Now, for those of you who were not able to arrive at that, there was some problem, there was some mistake in how you process this information. So again, I hope that you are able to understand that now. Let's look at statement 1. Statement 1 says that n leaves no remainder when divided by 4. All this is saying is that n is an even number, which means that you got your answer, right? So answer can be found. So statement 1 is sufficient. Now let's look at statement 2. Statement 2 says that square root of n is a prime number, which means n is square of a prime number. Now what all prime numbers are there? 2, 3, 5, 7. Now 2 is the only even prime number, right? Which means that you don't know whether this statement tells you whether n is even or odd, because there is one case in which n is even, right? Which means that statement 2 is not sufficient. So choice A is the correct answer. So tell me, where did you falter in this question? Statement 2 analysis, significant of exponent being odd or even, did not take 2. Okay. All right. So, and this is a very, very important analysis that I'm going to show you right now. Okay. When you solve a question on your own, it's very important for you to know. Okay, let me ask. So let me first finish what I'm saying here. When you are solving questions on your own, it's very important for you to know what are you not able to do. Okay. For example, in this case, I asked you, okay, why did you answer this question incorrectly? There are some people who are saying that the very first step, they couldn't identify whether n should be odd or even, right? Now, the remedy for that is that you need to be able to analyze that question statement properly, right? In this case, you needed to process. In this case, there is this conceptual understanding as well with regards to negative remainders. That is one thing. Second thing is you needed to apply that understanding, right? So when you say that you were not able to arrive at the simplification of the question statement in this case, that means there is some level of conceptual understanding that's an issue and some level of application of that concept that's an issue, right? So you need to work on that part. You need to work on enhancing that part. Now, if you were not able to analyze statement 2 properly because you didn't consider 2 as an even number there, as a possible even number, that's where that means that again you have issue with the conceptual understanding of what prime numbers are. Okay, sorry. So you were not able to consider 2 as the prime number. That means there is that conceptual issue over there. Okay, so it's very important for you to know what are you not getting so that you can implement the corrective action. Okay, does this make sense? Today, when you solve questions, when you prepare for Quant, do you ask yourself, which step of the process am I faltering? Do you get those that specific feedback that, okay, I need to be working on this part here? You cannot just put, for this question in your error log, you cannot just put DS and divisibility and remainder. Right? Yes, it's a divisibility and remainder question, but what part of the divisibility and remainder were you not able to apply here? Right? That's very important. If it was statement 2 where you faltered, then your error log should have something that's completely different. Then your error log is really your conceptual understanding of prime numbers, specifically that 2 is the only even prime number. That concept you are aware of, but you were not able to apply that concept. So that 200% clarity in that concept doesn't exist. Okay, if you were not able to process 38 remainder 13, that utilizing the negative remainders, then you need to ask yourself, is it that I don't know negative remainders, or is it that I have an understanding of what a negative remainder is, but I wasn't skilled enough to apply that? So that 200% clarity wasn't there. Right, and this level of strategic review is very, very important for you to be able to improve and get to that level of proficiency that you need to in order to get to that 90 percentile score. And that is what you get when you utilize the e-GMAT course, because each and every question that is solved, as I said earlier, is solved utilizing step-by-step process. Okay, so that you are so we enable you to do this level of strategic review when you solve those questions, when you go through the files on your own. Okay, so with this, let's come to the last question here. Let's solve this one and let's click on still solving. Go ahead. All right, last few seconds here. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So here are the results. So here's the before and after. So more students are leaning towards choice D now. Earlier there was love for choice B as well, but that love has reduced. Love for just choice A has also gone down, so that is good. All right. So what is it that, okay, so let me go through the solution here and then we'll talk about what made the difference in this question. So technically, so yes, there has been a marked improvement in this question as well, in the performance on this question as well. So essentially what we need to figure out is, we need to find out the remainder when 4m is divided by 16q. And this is where a lot of your visualization skills are going to come into picture, are going to play a big role. Okay. So what does statement 1 tell me? Statement 1 tells me that m leaves a remainder 4 when divided by 32 raised to the power 32. First of all, how many of you, when you solved the question the first time, actually got scared looking at this statement? When you solved the question the first time, you know, divided by 32 raised to the power 32 as a divisor, you know, that is a little scary thing. How about now? When you solve the question now, how was that experience? Were you still scared of it? Yes or no? So what made the difference? Why were you not scared of it? And these are the things that you have to ponder about. Remember, it's not just one question which is at stake here. It's your entire quant score, right? So you have to understand what is the difference before and after. You're aware of the concept. Yes, you are aware. You have that. You have practiced the concept in the right manner. And it's not, you won't get this level of practice if you are, okay, tell me, would you have gotten this level of practice had you solved questions randomly from official guide and or GMAT club and or any other prep course? You have prepared for this, right? But you didn't have that level of clarity because it's not your job to figure out what questions to solve. That is my job. That is our job at e-GMAT to tell you what questions to solve. Okay, and if we do our job well, then you can do your job well of going through those questions and being able to solve the 700 level questions. Okay, so it's not that you're not doing something right. You're doing things right. It's just that the sources that you've been using, those have not been the right sources for you. Okay, so again, let's come back to this part here. Statement 1 says that m is equal to, so we are processing this, we have written that down in indivisibility and remainder equation form. Then again, now we have to visualize this, and this is relatively straightforward now, right? Now remember, all the initial questions that we solved up front, where I said that you should not use brute force calculations, that process skill of visualization is coming in handy now, because now you can take a look at these two. You already have had practice of applying that visualization skills on numbers, and now when you see over here with some complicated variables and numbers, now that visualization skill is the test of that visualization skill of yours, which a number of you were able to do. How many of you were able to process it in this manner to get the remainder 0? And that is the whole point of solving those easier questions, not by brute force, but by step-by-step process, so that you can ultimately solve such questions correctly. Okay? All right, so again, in this case, what we are doing is converting it in plain English, and there's a little bit more processing involved here, because here you have to do one bit of processing, one additional step over here, wherein you see 4m, you have to express 4m in terms of a number that's divisible by 16 plus a number that's not divisible by 16, right? That's what you need to figure out so that you can find out the remainder r. You see, over here, you see the equation in m. So the first thing that you do is you multiply both sides by 4. That's the first thing that you have to do, which is what we are doing here, multiplying both sides by 4. Now you are looking at what's inside and you are trying to find out which part over here is simply a multiple of 16 and which part is not a multiple of 16. And if you notice, again, all of this over here, this is one number here, right? 4 into 32 into 32 raised to the power 31 into k, and then you have 4 into 4 over here. These are your two terms, and frankly, both of these terms are multiples of 16, right? So essentially, you don't have any term that is not a multiple of 16, which means that r is equal to 0. As simple as that. You don't even need to do all of this processing. This is just more algebraic stuff that I have done over here. But if you just make that observation, you're done. You're golden there. Okay. All right. So you know that choice A is sufficient. Now statement 1 is sufficient. Now you look at statement 2. Now statement 2 is where things get a bit more involved, and that's where I expected some of you to falter. Okay, but follow along over here. Again, for you to be able to handle statement 2 properly, you need to go through the similar process that we went through in this session for statement 1, which is having you solve those easier questions wherein you can practice your visualization skill. For statement number 2, you need to do the same thing but in prime numbers and even an odd section. Okay, so when you go through the course, you will be able to build those skills by going through the application files in those 2 modules, and then when you come to this one, you will already be comfortable processing this type of information. So let's do that right now. So what you have is that m raised to the power m cube is divisible by 16, which means that if I write m in terms of its prime factors, I know for sure that 2 is definitely a prime factor. Okay. So I process it further. I cube both sides because ultimately I need to have n cubed here, right? So n cubed is equal to 2 to the power 3a into other prime factors, right? Now I know that 2 to the n cubed is divisible by 16. 16 is what? 16 is 2 to the power 4, which means that the power of 2 over here, which is 3a should be at least 4, which means a should be at least 4 by 3, which means minimum value of a that's possible is 2, which means that m is 2 to the power 2 something, right? Which means 4m is nothing but 4 into 2 to the power 2, which means 4m is 16q. Again, r is 0. Okay, so statement 2 is sufficient, so the correct answer is choice D. Okay, and quite a few of you selected choice D as the correct answer. All right, so with this, we are here wrapping up the session now. Okay, now, again, it's very important for you to know what is it that you want to accomplish in order to, what is it that you need to accomplish, not want to, you need to accomplish in order to get to that 90th percentile in GMAT Quant. Okay, and you need that 90th percentile so that you can get to your target score of 730 or above. Okay. The correct answer for the previous question was choice D. Okay, so again, I want to share certain success stories with you of people who have been in different at different levels of starting points. Okay, the first success story is for someone who think they are good in GMAT Quant, and you should read his Krish's verified review on GMAT Club. Krish had always done well in Quant, okay, but he was stumped by the Quant that was asked in the GMAT. Okay, he constantly faltered while answering GMAT questions. He fell in familiar traps. He was really frustrated with the lack of his progress, and that's when he decided that he needed to change the way he was approaching GMAT Quant. So he started following a methodical approach, okay, and he changed his approach towards data sufficiency, okay. Now, after making these changes, he was able to improve his Quant score to 51, and that's the highest possible. He scored a 740, okay. So essentially, you need to be able to organize information properly. You need to build those process skills, right? Again, your goal is to answer those difficult questions correctly, as many difficult questions as you can correctly, okay? Likewise, Leonardo, a South American, he had not been excellent in GMAT Quant, and he was really stuck at Q45 despite trying really hard. He needed a high score. Why? Because he wanted to apply to finance-focused schools such as NYU Wharton or Tepper, right? To improve beyond Q45, Leo adopted a methodical approach. Again, same thing that Krish did. He started consciously focusing on constraint. That is one of the process skills, right? He started showing his work on paper. He was very methodical. And once he had his approach right, he made extensive use of Scholaranium to provide areas to ISO, so that he was able to isolate areas of where he needed to improve upon. Okay, and then he used custom quizzing feature of Quant Scholaranium to ensure that he had actually improved. And because of his good Quant score and excellent verbal score, he was admitted to Wharton, Stern, and Tepper. Now, Mazibar is an individual who was extremely weak in Quant. Okay, his starting score was Q30, a mere 20 percentile. Mazibar, which is his PTG forum name, spent a lot of time reading Quant books, but he was not able to improve. He benefited from the progressive learning architecture at e-GMAT, and that's something that I've been talking about, that progressively increasing the difficulty level of questions, the way we have done in this session, right? You need to be exposed to that. And he was able to cement his basics before taking on difficult questions. And that's what we did, right? When you took on the difficult questions up front, you faltered. But then when we helped you build your conceptual understanding, when we helped build your process skills, you were able to improve in the same 3 questions towards the end, right? And that's the beauty of going through it in a step-by-step manner. Right? And in the case when his basics were not strong enough, he was given appropriate feedback by the system, right? And that is very important. You need to know what you need to work on. If you don't know that you need to work on even odd numbers, then you wouldn't really spend effort on that, right? So that is you get at least I would say 200, I would say about, in number properties course itself, you get about 70 to 90 feedback points as you're going through the course, so that you know what is it that you need to focus on in order to solidify your understanding, right? Now, because of quizzes that are built into each file, he was able to leverage data to help him, okay? And ultimately, he was able to improve his Quant score to Q45, which is 59 percentile, and that was a huge improvement from his starting score, okay? Guillermo's story is again an amazing story of an individual who had an extremely strong desire to study at top B schools. He started at Q38, which coincidentally is 38 percentile on GMAT Quant. And he realized that he needed a stellar Quant score to get an admit from Wharton and GSB Chicago. And the only way to improve from such low score was to truly focus on learning. And that's what I've been talking about in this session, which he did utilizing the video lessons. And he was short on time. So he used Quant Scholaranium to isolate areas where he needed most help. And that's very important to know what it is that you need to work on versus what is it that you've already mastered. And you do that through the feedback that you receive from your e-GMAT course. Now, like Leonardo, he used custom quiz feature to ensure that he did indeed improve upon these topics, improve on on these topics. Okay. So again, to ace GMAT Quant, focus on learning and adopting good habits, learning the concepts, getting to that 200% clarity, adopting good habits in terms of the process skills of visualization, process skill of translation, process skill of simplification, process skill of applying constraints. Okay, those are the process skills that you need to work on, you need to build so that you can get to that target GMAT score of yours. You can get to that 90th percentile in Quant. Okay, so again, I can't emphasize enough on this. Make sure that you have that 200% clarity in the concepts. And how do you know whether you have that 200% clarity in the concepts? And that's through the feedback that you get from the course. Okay. Ensure that you solve questions in a step-by-step manner. How do you ensure of that? You make sure of that by utilizing the solutions that are based on the step-by-step method. Each and every question in the e-GMAT platform, whether it's the course, whether it's the Scholaranium, whether it's the mock test, each and every question is solved using a step-by-step process so that you know what step you're faltering on, which concept you need to build upon. Okay, become an active reader on the question statement. Now we are talking more question-specific stuff. Just observe a little bit, just observe the numbers. The numbers are there, the information is there for a particular reason. Okay, it's not randomly selected. Okay, so observe that, analyze the question statement as much as you can, simplify it. Trust the test maker. That's another thing. The test maker is not going to give you something that is not possible to be solved. In fact, what the test taker is doing is he's spending the time in making sure that he gives you the question that's solid enough so that he can test your logical application on the question. That's what the whole point of GMAT is, right? And believe in your skills. That's the most important thing. Believe that you have everything in your arsenal to be able to approach those questions, to be able to solve those questions correctly. Okay, to have that confidence that you can solve 700 plus level questions correctly, that confidence itself takes you to that goal of 98th percentile in quant. Okay, and how do you get that confidence? By going through the course that gives you that feedback time and again. Okay, feedback is not just important to make corrective actions. Feedback is important to make sure that you have that positive reinforcement that what you're doing is actually right. Okay, because all of us need that positive reinforcement. Okay, I needed that positive reinforcement from you when I asked you how the session is going, right? So if we need that, right? Because you're putting in so much of effort, you need that positive reinforcement. And for that, it's very important to get that feedback. Okay. All right then. So with this, it's come to the end of this section here and end of this session. And there are a couple of questions in this practice set. I would want you to go through those questions. There are two questions here. Also, you have quite a few questions for those of you who are not e-GMAT students. You have quite a few content in the free trial, so go through that as well. And then quite a few questions in Scholarium as well. So you should look at that content, look at the detail in which we provide you the solutions, and then make the decision. What is it that you want to do in order to get to that 98th percentile in quant? Okay.